Have you ever found yourself wondering if there's a deeper connection between, how smart someone is, how much education they get, and their mental health?
Oh, absolutely.
It often feels like success and well-being are linked somehow, doesn't it?
It does.
Like maybe having a sharp mind or a really strong academic background might give you some kind of shield against life's mental challenges.
It's certainly a compelling idea. And
Yeah.
look, it's one researchers have been exploring for a long time. We know there's this, well, established link.
Right,
Higher educational attainment seems connected to better mental health.
right.
Studies like Erickson
Mm.
et al. Back in 2016 showed that pretty clearly.
Mm.
But the real question, the bit that makes this really fascinating, is what's actually driving that connection.
That's exactly what we're digging into today. Our mission here is to take you on a deep dive into this, groundbreaking study just published in Psychological Science.
The Nordmorn study.
Nordmo and colleagues, 2025. And what makes it so powerful, I think, is that it's a total population analysis.
Which is incredibly rare.
So rare and so comprehensive, it really tries to untangle that complex relationship. Cognitive abilities, educational attainment, and, the risk of mental disorders. We're kind of offering you a shortcut here,
Yeah, breaking it down.
trying to help you grasp the key insights, some surprising facts maybe, understand these nuanced connections.
And our core source, as you said, is that research article. Cognitive abilities and educational attainment as antecedents of mental disorders. A total population study of males. By Nordmo et al.
Quite a title.
It is, but the scale and the method, it's just a goldmine of information.
Okay, so on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? More education often means better mental health.
Generally, yes.
But here's where this study asks a really intriguing question. Is that link between lower education and mental health problems maybe better explained by something else? Specifically, underlying lower cognitive abilities. I mean, is it the diploma protecting you, or is it maybe the brain that earned the diploma doing the heavy lifting?
That's the absolute central puzzle they wanted to solve. And look, prior research has definitely hinted at this.
Okay.
I mean, you've got studies like Bridger and Daly, Gale et al., suggesting that early cognitive ability measures can predict later mental disorders.
Right, seen those.
And yeah, lower educational attainment consistently predicts more mental health issues. We saw that in Bowman, Malangini.
So we've had these pieces floating around, but what makes this specific Nordmo study stand out so much? Why does it give us something new?
Well, what's truly exceptional is that it's population-based. This is so crucial because it helps get around what we call healthy volunteer bias.
Ah, right. Explain that a bit.
Well, think about it. In many studies, maybe people with lower cognitive abilities or less education or significant mental health problems, they might be less likely to sign up.
Right. Or they might drop out.
Exactly. So you end up with data mostly from people who are, healthy enough or motivated enough to stick with it. You might be missing the very people you need to understand most.
Makes sense.
But with this study's compulsory recruitment for the military assessment, they literally got almost everyone.
Wow.
Nearly the entire male population for those birth years in Norway. So that bias pretty much eliminated. And importantly, previous research just hadn't really looked at cognitive abilities and education together in such a big representative way.
So it's hard to tease them apart.
Very hard to disentangle their individual contributions. Until now, really.
That's a huge advantage then. So how on earth did they manage to get their hands on such a massive, comprehensive data set? Walk us through the nuts and bolts.
Okay, so they looked at an absolutely massive sample. 272,351 Norwegian males.
Just staggering.
It really is. These were military conscripts born between 1970 and 1979. And the participation rate is just incredible. 95.9% attended the compulsory recruitment procedure.
Almost everyone.
Like I said, almost the entire male population for those birth cohorts. An incredibly representative snapshot.
Okay, so nearly everyone's in the sample. How did they measure cognitive abilities for all these young men?
Right, so adolescent cognitive abilities were measured using the standard Norwegian Armed Forces test battery.
When they were teens, basically.
Yeah, on average about 17.8 years old. The results were then converted into these Stanning scores. Standard 9.
Stanning, right. Heard of those.
Scores from 1 to 9. A 5 is basically an average IQ of 100. And each point up or down is roughly 7.5 IQ points.
Okay, so let's break that down. Stanine 1 is what, around IQ 70, and Stanine 9 is up near 130?
Roughly, yes. It covers a really wide range of cognitive ability across the whole population.
A very comprehensive measure then.
It is. And the test battery itself was pretty robust. 3 subtests. Progressive matrices, numerical reasoning, and word comprehension. Good stuff.
What about tracking their education later on? How did they do that?
That came from Norway's National Registry data. Highly reliable stuff. They looked at educational attainment by the time the participants hit age 35.
So well into adulthood.
Right. And they categorized it into 4 main levels. Just compulsory, then upper secondary, a bachelor's degree, and finally a master's degree, or even higher. The registry data makes that tracking very accurate.
And the mental disorder diagnoses, where did that info come from? What were they looking at?
That also came from registry data, specifically the Norwegian Primary Care Register, KUHR. They looked at diagnoses recorded when participants were between 36 and 40 years old.
Primary care. So their main doctor.
Exactly. And this data is incredibly comprehensive because, well, something like 99.1% of Norwegians see their GP between those ages.
Almost universal coverage there.
Pretty much. And they included a wide range of common disorders: anxiety, depression, substance abuse, psychoses, and also had a summary category for any mental disorder.
Okay, now one of the things that really struck me as clever, maybe the most ingenious part, was this sibling analysis.
Ah, yes, the brother pairs.
87,583 pairs of brothers. Why was comparing brothers so crucial here? What does that let you do?
It's a really, really powerful design. The whole point of comparing siblings, especially brothers raised together, is to try and control for all those unobserved shared family factors.
Like what?
Things like shared upbringing, the family's socioeconomic background, neighborhood influences, even 50% of their shared genetic variation.
Ah, okay.
By comparing brothers, you essentially account for a lot of that automatically. It helps you isolate the independent effect of something like cognitive ability, stripping away those shared family influences.
So it helps pinpoint what's really down to the individual's cognitive ability versus just their background.
Precisely. It gets closer to causality, though it doesn't prove it entirely. It really strengthens the findings.
That makes a ton of sense, like a natural experiment almost. Okay, so with all this incredible data and this clever design, what did they actually find? Let's hit hypothesis 1, the basic link between cognitive abilities and mental disorders.
Right. So the study found a remarkably strong and consistent relationship here. They called it a monotonic decreasing risk. It just means basically as cognitive ability went up, step by step, the risk of getting a mental disorder diagnosis consistently went down. No weird dips or anything.
Just a straight downward trend.
Exactly. And to put a number on it, this is pretty striking. There's about a 3-fold increase in getting any mental disorder diagnosis when comparing the highest cognitive ability group.
Stand 9.
Stand 9, yeah. Only about 10% of them got a diagnosis. Compare that to the lowest group, Stand 1, where a full 30% got a diagnosis.
Wow. So 3 out of 10 in the lowest group versus 1 out of 10 in the highest.
That's the difference. It's a really stark contrast, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Was there anything that didn't quite follow that pattern? Any exceptions?
Yes. One main exception stood out. Affective psychosis, which mainly includes bipolar disorder.
Okay.
For that specific condition, they didn't find a strong link with cognitive abilities, which actually lines up with some other research, too. It seems to be a bit different.
It's interesting. Now, what about that idea? You hear it sometimes, that really, really smart people, the exceptionally high cognitive ability folks, might actually be more prone to mental health issues. You know, the tortured genius kind of trope.
Right, that stereotype.
Did the study find any support for that?
That's a great question. And they looked at it directly because they had those high-ability individuals in the sample. And the answer was no.
Really?
Yeah. Contrary to some, earlier speculation, there was that Mensa member survey, maybe Penny et al.'s hyperbrain theory.
Right. I remember those.
This huge population study found zero evidence that people with exceptionally high cognitive abilities, the Standing 9 group, above the 96th percentile, had any increased risk.
So the opposite, actually.
For most common disorders, yes. Those with the highest cognitive abilities actually had the lowest likelihood of diagnosis.
Huh.
It really suggests those earlier studies might have been based on, well, non-representative samples. Maybe selection bias played a role. This study really challenges that old stereotype.
That's a pretty significant debunking, then. Okay, let's move to their second hypothesis. This was looking at the combined power of cognitive ability and education. What happened when they looked at both together?
Yeah, this is where the picture gets even more nuanced, I think. They found that cognitive ability predicts mental disorders above and beyond educational attainment.
Ah, so it's not just education mediating the effect.
Exactly. Even when you account for how much education someone got, their cognitive ability still predicts their risk independently. They both matter distinctly.
So it's not simply that smarter people get more schooling, and that's the only reason they have better mental health. The cognitive ability itself seems to play its own role.
That's what the data strongly suggests.
Okay, so given that, who did the study identify as being at the highest risk, the most vulnerable group?
Yeah, the study clearly pointed to the group with the highest risk, males who had both low cognitive abilities and only compulsory education. A kind of double whammy, if you will.
Right. How high was their risk?
Their risk for any mental disorder diagnosis was really significant, 37.8%, nearly 4 in 10.
Wow. And the lowest risk group?
That was the opposite end of the spectrum. Those with high cognitive abilities and a master's degree or higher, their diagnosis rate was only 8.5%.
Okay, so 37.8% versus 8.5%.
That's a massive difference, right? A 29.3 percentage point gap between those two extreme groups. It really shows the cumulative impact.
It certainly does. Okay, and finally, hypothesis 3. Back to the brothers. What did that sibling comparison ultimately tell us about, family factors versus individual traits? Did the link hold up even within families?
It did. That sibling analysis was really powerful here. It showed that the link between lower cognitive abilities and a higher risk of mental disorders held true even when comparing brothers raised in the same family.
So it wasn't just about shared background.
It suggests it's not solely due to shared family environment or socioeconomic status, or even that 50% shared genetic component. It points towards individual differences in cognitive ability being independently predictive, even within the same family context.
Interesting. Was the effect just as strong?
It was a bit attenuated, meaning slightly weaker when they compared brothers, and also factored in education. But the connection was still there, still significant. It highlights that independent nature of cognitive ability's role.
Okay, so this isn't just about the hand you're dealt through family background. It suggests something, deeper about individual cognitive function. So what does this all mean then for the bigger picture of mental health? Why might we see this link?
Well, the study suggests a few potential pathways or reasons for this connection.
Okay.
One idea is the persistent stress that might come from underachievement.
Constantly struggling.
Yeah, imagine the ongoing strain of finding school difficult, maybe struggling to find or keep good work, or even just managing daily tasks that seem easier for others. That can take a toll over time.
Makes sense. What else?
A kind of complementary explanation is that lower cognitive abilities can often lead to less education, which in turn often leads to lower paying jobs, maybe less optimal living conditions.
Right, a cascade effect.
Exactly. And all of that can increase exposure to various risk factors for mental disorders, stress at work, financial strain, poor housing, things like that.
And does it also affect getting help?
That's another crucial point they raise, yeah. There could be challenges in accessing or maybe even benefiting from good mental health treatment for individuals with lower cognitive abilities.
How so?
Well, maybe understanding treatment options, navigating the healthcare system, or even engaging effectively with therapy could be more difficult. Some previous research, like Harvey et al. Or Necht et al., has hinted at this too.
So it's complex. It influences life path, risk exposure, and maybe the ability to get help.
It seems to be a really complex interplay, yes.
Did the study find the link was equally strong for all types of mental disorders, or did it vary?
It did vary somewhat. The link between cognitive abilities and mental disorders seemed a bit weaker for what we call internalizing disorders.
Like anxiety and depression.
Exactly. Compared to externalizing or thought disorders, things like psychosis or substance abuse problems. The link was stronger there.
So the pattern holds generally, but the strength varies depending on the specific condition.
That's right. It suggests the underlying mechanisms might differ a bit across the spectrum of disorders.
Now, you mentioned how strong this study was, but no study is perfect, right? What limitations did the researchers themselves point out?
That's always important to consider. They acknowledged a few things. First, they relied on primary care diagnoses.
From the GPs.
Right, which is comprehensive in Norway, but it might still miss people who perhaps don't seek treatment or whose conditions aren't recorded there.
Okay, what else?
Also, the study focused only on Norwegian males who were assessed in adolescence and followed up around age 36-40. So we need to be careful about generalizing directly to women or other age groups or people in different countries.
Especially countries without Norway's strong social safety net.
Exactly. Norway has robust universal healthcare and welfare systems, which might buffer some risks. Findings might look different elsewhere.
Any other key limitations?
One more big one is they couldn't definitively rule out reverse causality.
Meaning the mental health issue came first?
Potentially. Like, could early life mental distress or neurodevelopmental issues have perhaps influenced cognitive test performance back when they were 17, rather than the cognitive abilities solely influencing later mental health? It's hard to completely untangle that timing.
Right, the chicken and egg problem.
But
But despite those caveats, the study's strengths still sound pretty formidable.
well, they really are. That robust population-wide data, the high quality of the measurements for both cognitive ability and the health outcomes, these are huge
Gives
strengths.
us a lot of confidence in the results.
It provides incredibly valuable, reliable insights into these complex relationships. Allows for conclusions with a pretty high degree of confidence, yes.
Okay, so let's try to pull it all together then. For someone listening, what are the absolute core takeaways from this deep dive into the Nordmost study?
Okay, first big one. Higher cognitive abilities generally mean a lower risk of most common mental disorders.
And crucially,
Crucially, no evidence of increased risk at the very top end of cognitive ability. That common myth doesn't seem to hold up here.
got it. Second point.
Second, while getting more education definitely plays a positive role for mental health, cognitive ability has its own independent impact, even when you account for education level.
Okay, number 3.
Third, and this is really important for thinking about prevention, that combination of both low cognitive abilities and low educational attainment creates a particularly high-risk group for mental disorders.
The double whammy we talked about.
Exactly. And finally, thanks to that really clever sibling analysis, we know these links aren't just artifacts of family background or shared genes alone. They seem to reflect something about individual-level cognitive function.
Okay, powerful findings.
Which really leads us to a provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.
Go on.
If individuals with both lower cognitive ability and lower educational attainment really are, as researchers put it, an underutilized target group for mental disorder prevention,
Yeah.
what kind of innovative support systems or maybe different educational pathways could we design that would truly make a difference in their lives? How could we start thinking about interventions tailored specifically to meet their unique needs and challenges to try and mitigate that heightened risk?